and welcome to Grow Big Red. I'm John Fesch with the University of Nebraska Extension Division, and today we're going to talk about fall is for planting. Now, fall is for planting a lot of different things, and most of the things we plant involve the same types of techniques, but there are differences, of course, according to what we are going to plant. People often ask me, why fall? Why is fall for planting? Really, I'm kind of tired of the plants by the time fall rolls around. Spring is for planting. Well, and really, from a horticulturist standpoint, fall is for planting because it's the beginning of a growing season. We have 2, 3, sometimes up into 3.5 good months of growing conditions, depending on the fall. But on the average, around 3 months of good growing conditions in September, October, and into November, where the temperatures are cool. The rainfall is nice, usually nice and light, kind of in that 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch range. They still get a lot of sunny conditions. And then what happens is those are all good growing conditions for most plants. Then we take a brief rest over some may argue here in the Midwest that it's a little bit longer than brief. But then April rolls around and the plants start growing again. So we're pretty much talking about perennial plants for the most part, although if you had started in July and August, you could be talking about vegetable plants as well. But at this point, we're talking about ornamental perennial plants. And then the plants start to grow again. You get a great advantage of those establishing a root system this fall. If you try to do that in the spring, the soils are cooler, they're wetter, they're hard to plant into, and we got a lot of variability in terms of those fluctuations. In the fall, things are a little bit more stable, and we have a little bit better growing conditions. So that's why fall. And there are a lot of things that we can put in the ground in the fall that do really well. With all these plants, though, soil preparation is really important. And that involves a few things. First of all, we've got to get something to loosen up the soil. And really a great tool for that is this type of pitchfork. There are a couple of different types. If the soil is really compacted, this 4-pronged one works really well, because then you can do sort of a scoop and dump approach where you dig it in the ground, lift it up, and drop it back down again. And that works really well for loosening our compacted soils. So first-time homeowners, this is exactly what you're going to want to do. And even if you've got an area that hasn't been moved or turned or dealt with for a while, this works really well. The other types of pitchforks are really more compost turners, and you'll see about 8 or so thinner prongs that come down, and they work really well for soils that have been worked in the spring. But if you haven't done much other than just maybe looking at a patch of weeds, this is the tool you want to use. And then, of course, for the planting itself, you're going to want to use a sod spade. This works really well for planting in the fall. It's got a nice sharp edge on it, and it really does a good job of planting in areas, especially if we're going to be planting smaller plant material. It does a nice job of using it after the pitchfork has been used to scoop, and then this does a good job of creating individual planting holes. Now, if you're a little bit of a lazy gardener, and nothing wrong with admitting you might be, then this works really well for planting small plants. It's a bulb planter, but you can even put in small perennials with it, and it's really just a plunk, turn, and pull out. If you've ever watched, if you think back to the movie Caddyshack, you saw the gopher being chased around in the holes that were changed by the greenkeeper. And if you're even a golfer today, you see greenkeepers and golf course superintendents doing this, where they'll just dig a hole with a special tool, much like this, only with a long handle. So it just does a small area. So if you're just going to pop in small bulbs, this might be the ticket for you too. But these 3 tools work really well. The next consideration is right plant, right place. In all of horticulture, we talk about right plant, right place. And this is where you think about soil and sun and a variety of different factors, drainage. And we don't want to be putting in shady plants in the sun and sunny plants in the shade. So this is really, really important. Drainage is always important. Soil conditions, wind speed, all of these different factors are really important when you're talking about putting the right plant in the right place. It's important to read the care tag and just look at the preferences. For example, a plant like this will always have a care tag where you look at the different conditions where it does well. And if there are special conditions or special considerations, those are well noted on the care tag itself. And you always want to consult that when you're buying a plant, either in person at a local garden center or online. Either way, you're going to see a set of conditions. If you don't see those set of conditions or a set of specific instructions, move on. Select some other vendor to buy your plants from, because that's what you really need to know to have success. Right plant, right place. Speaking of plants like this, especially when you're dealing with already growing plants, plants that have already put out some roots and shoots, the big thing is, yes, be wowed and be excited by the foliage and the flowers, which of course you look at a plant like this, like a New England aster, it's exciting. I mean, those colors are vibrant. But don't be just thinking about that. Also be thinking about the roots. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, the roots are much more important, getting the roots established. So the steps here are squeeze the plant pot a little bit, and then grab here by the base and tease this out of the pot and look at the roots. And as I look at this, I see roots well established on the outside of the periphery of the plant mass, and a few underneath here. And these are the ones that might be a little bit problematic. So you just might want to tease these open a little bit. And as I do that, I really don't see a ton of roots there. If we saw really thick woody roots, or a lot of them, a lot more of them spiraling around, that would be a big concern. But in this case, I think I'm okay. When I go to plant this, I'll just simply do a little bit more of that. Maybe I'll take the pitchfork and kind of loosen them just a little bit. But this is certainly something to be done. It's not real exciting to be done, but it's really important for success. And if you don't look at the roots, you might be disappointed after a little bit of time goes by, because you're not going to have a chance to fix that later. After you put the pot in the ground and take the pot loose and put the roots in the ground, you're not going to have any chance to fix that later. That's a one-time opportunity for success, is to do that, and so that works out well for you. So uncoil the roots, spread them out, and go from there. All right, the next thing to think about is the depth of planting. So you've prepared the soil and you've loosened it. Sometimes putting in a little bit of compost is a good idea, especially again if you're planting into heavy clay soil and you haven't done much with it. The compost, which is really just a collection of roots and old shoots, you can even still see some leaves that haven't totally decomposed, has kind of a nice earthy smell to it. This is like black gold. This is the wonderful thing that if you're planting into heavy clay, you're in a new part of the metro area, and it's not a very fertile soil, it's hard to do the digging, then this is the ticket. This is what you want to work in with that scoop and dump technique, is to work in some compost. That's going to really be helpful. You can make compost or you can buy it. Either way, it works out fine. Cottonburg compost, GRO, just a variety of different things that you can use in order to loosen up the soil. So the planting depth is what I'm talking about. After you've prepared the soil and got it enriched with a little bit of compost, the planting depth is the next thing. And I'm going to show you a couple examples of that. Again, you got to take this off. Sometimes we get the questions of, do you take the pot off or not? And yes, you absolutely do. But if I can show you this right here, the planting depth is not right here, it's not up here. It's right here at the base of where the stem comes out of the ground. And I'm going to stick my finger in and then pull it out so you can see where it was. Or maybe I'll use my small finger, my pinky finger, to show you. You're going to want to take this top root and have those be at the soil line. And this would be the case for shrubs, for trees, for perennials like this, anything that has an above ground part of the plant at this time of the year. Is you're going to want to just plant this right at soil grade. And that becomes really important so that the plant is able to set out new roots and isn't planted too deeply or too high. If it's planted too deep, it's going to have problems with that not enough oxygen. If it's planted too high, especially with fall planting, you're going to have trouble with the plant drying out and desiccating, and those roots drying out over winter. Another example that I could think of is with bulbs. Bulbs need to be planted under the ground, not very close to the top soil surface. If you're planting vegetables, almost all of those need to be planted near the soil surface, right kind of at the soil surface from seeds or from transplants. Again, the same kind of thing. But bulbs need to be planted deeply, and each one is planted a little bit deeper than others. If you're not sure how deep to plant something, I'll give you a general guideline. Plant it about 3 times the depth of the width of the bulb. So in this case, the bulb is about, oh, it's almost 2 inches deep, 2 inches wide. We'll plant it 6 inches deep. But again, there will be instructions on the bulb package as to how deep to plant them. On average, we plant daffodils about 7 inches deep, tulips 5 to 6 inches deep, grape hyacinths about 4 inches deep, and crocus and other plants like that probably about 2 inches deep. So everyone is slightly different, and you'll get instructions on how deep to plant that right here on the base of the packaging itself. And again, if you don't, you can find that information out. You can call us at the extension office. We'll help you with that information. There's always this issue of upside down or right side up when it comes to tulips. And while it isn't a terrible error in the success of the planting to plant it upside down, because eventually what will happen is the shoot will come out and turn up. But it's always a little bit of a head start if you can put the tip or the pointy end up. All the roots will come out of this basal plate, and they will provide new roots at that point. While you're doing this, you also might want to just inspect them and see if they're soft and spongy. These are all nice and firm, and I can poke them with my finger and not have any soft spots on there. They can have these little bumps, and all that is no problem at all. It's just part of the way the bulb grows. But if they're soft, that's a problem. Now the papery part is always a problem, is always thought to be a problem too, where these papery scales are here, where, oh, is my bulb damaged? No, they're not damaged at all. Again, it's just the way the bulb grows. So it's not a concern there at all. Now we do have a lot of choices. I've already talked about some of the bulbs. We've also referred to some of the perennials. But there are other things you can plant too. All trees and shrubs are great to plant in the fall. They just, again, get that root system off to a good start. If you're still wanting to do this and you're going to do this right away, we can still also do any seeding of your lawns. Sodding of lawns can happen almost all the way up through well, for sure all the way up to Halloween and maybe even up to Thanksgiving. The sodding already has an established root system. Get that off the ground and get it ready to go. So lots and lots of different plant choices here in the fall. Again, it's one of those things where you just want to take advantage of the weather conditions that fall presents us with. And the final thing I want to talk about is after planting care. And first of all, it's obvious, but we want to make sure that after we put a plant in the ground that it's watered well. Plants will dry out, roots will dry out if we're not planting well. There's really not a lot of need, if any need, for fertilizer in the fall. And because we want those roots to establish themselves, we don't want to stunt them by burning them with foliar or with a root fertilizer. So hold off on any fertilization until the spring after planting, and that way you're going to be in good shape. All right. Well, hopefully I've given you some good inspiration and some good advice on doing some planting here in the fall. Lots of opportunities for you. If you have more questions, contact one of the Master Gardeners here, 444-7804, or just stop by. We're at 80th and West Center Road on the south side of Center Street, and we'd love to see you. I'm John Fesh with Nebraska Extension.